I'm going to show you how to get from a DWG file like this into a format that a Silhouette Studio will read and be able to cut accurately. So this is my wing template. So I've already kind of pre-created all of the individual pieces on here, but I started initially with this base drawing. So this is my wing geometry, or essentially these lines here. And the tip, and they're formed, these are just forms from straight lines, and my edge perimeter, my covering, you know, I've added a bit of overlap to the entire wing. So in the rest of this, I've created, these are arcs. So if you hover over the thing, you'll see it's an arc. So it's just a 2-point, you know, on a radius. And then these are also arcs, and they're really created from offsetting this original one, right? So this is just, these are exactly the same, just one is offset. And then the same thing with these, I create one and then I just offset the rest of them. So the whole drawing is essentially formed of lines and arcs. The problem with Silhouette is it does not like arcs. It's fine with a line because it's just 2 straight points. But it really wants segmented curves. So when you try to get this drawing into Silhouette, it'll create, the geometry will be wrong. It won't actually match this. So what you need to do is you need to get this out of an arc, and you need to get it into a spline or a polyline, and then effectively explode it into a bunch of segments. So before I do that though, you know, I would leave your drawing in the arcs and create your individual pieces. So to create the individual pieces, all I really do is I just copy the whole drawing, and I'll just kind of quickly do it there. And then let's say I'm going to create this white one. I'll delete what I don't want. Oops, I want that. Pardon me. I don't want the, you know, I don't want where the red's going to be. I don't want this back, right? I don't want the wingtip, because I'm going to go right out to the edge. You know, I don't really need the aileron in here at this point. And I don't need this inner root here. So that's kind of the extent of it. So then I'm going to extend these lines. Basically out to the edges here. And I don't really need these either. So I'm starting to get the general shape. Now I need an overlap. I'm going to make white my base color, and I'm going to put the other colors over top of it. So the red, the yellow, the blue. So I'm going to offset them by 2.5 millimeters, so 0.1 of an inch. So we're going to do an offset command, 0.1, and I'm going to offset all these in. Right. And I don't need to offset these ones because they're fine. So then really what I want to do now is I want to trim these up. So I'm going to delete the ones I don't need. So I don't need this one. You know, and I don't need these outer ones. I want the inner ones. So I'm just going to delete all those. And then I need to trim up these edges. So I'm going to use a fillet command for a lot of these. So fillet with a 0 radius. So your radius down here is 0. If it's not 0, you can type R and make it 0. I'm going to do multiples. I'm going to do a bunch at once. So then it's just going to ask me to start filleting. So I'm just going to start filleting. So you'll notice it just automatically trims these up to match. You can do these outside corners. You can't do where you need to split the ones in between. So you can't do these because you'll lose this entire line. So if I want to fill it from here to here, or from here to here, it doesn't exactly doesn't. So if I do this fillet command from here to here, you'll notice I lose that whole line. So I kind of lose this piece that I want to keep, right? So for these, I'm just going to do trim. Actually, maybe if I fill it like this, you might be able to kind of go, see, and then you lose the rest of it. So you can probably do the first one here. We can fill this end one up, but then these ones we're going to have to trim this one off. Whoops. So trim command, trim what we're trimming to. We can trim that one, or I guess, nope, pardon me. Trim this one off. That one's a little bit, so we need to extend that one. This one's a bit off, so we're going to trim it down. And we need to extend this one. So now we can trim in between these. So I don't need this guy, and I don't need that guy, but that guy there. So that's essentially what this part looks like. But again, we still have arcs, right? These are all arcs. So I'm going to delete this because I already have it created. So how do we get these arcs out of this format? Okay, so we need to get our arcs to this segmented curve and an ellipse, same thing. So we have a circle, an arc, an ellipse, right? They're all kind of these single point references, right? So one command you can use is a rebuild. So the CV rebuild. So yeah, it's going to ask you for how many vertices you want and the degree. And really these are just the accuracy. You'll notice there's a deviation here. And if you actually zoom in on this line when you do this command, you can do a preview and you can kind of see these vertices here, right? So the more you give them, the more accurate this gets, right? So this is, 0.002 of an inch, right? You can get, so if you go up to like 15, so what it does is it provides you, and then you delete your original geometry, it provides you, you'll notice now, this is a spline. So it's multiple points, but it's still a single entity, right? You'll notice it's not a bunch of individual pieces. So from here now, though, we can do what's called a spline edit. And we can convert that to a polyline. And basically what precision you want. I mean, the more precision you get, the more points you're going to have. So if you do 25, you can go up to 100, I think, or 99. So now you'll notice it's, and if we regenerate the drawing, so it's smooth, you'll notice this is now a bunch of individual segments, right? They're still connected together, but it's a bunch of individual segments, individual polylines, right? So there's a whole bunch of polylines connected together, right? So you could drag this and curve just this one segment, right? Right? So that's kind of where we need to get to. Now, once we got that, it's still not quite good enough because Silhouette wants completely individual segments. This is still really one line. So we take that line and we explode it. So we use the explode command, we explode it. Now we have a bunch of individual line segments. So that's what we have. So we do that for every single curve on this drawing. I don't believe you can do multiple, so if we do a rebuild on these, yeah, it's going to ask us for a single curve to rebuild. So that one, so we go okay. So you basically got to do this the same. You can use enter and just keep doing this the same over and over again, right? And you got to do this the whole drawing. So unfortunately, it's a little bit painful. So now we have a bunch of, you'll notice, splines, right? So then all these we can do, again, convert to polyline. So we do a polyline or a spline edit command, right? Convert to polyline, precision 25. So the same thing. We can just hit enter, select spline, convert to polyline, hit enter, select spline. Right, we do the same thing over and over again. So now we have a bunch of polylines. So if we just take this whole thing and we explode it, boom. So this now is the exact correct geometry, or I guess drawing format for Silhouette Studio. So if you don't do this, you will end up with the wrong geometry in your vinyl cutter file. So you have to do this to every single part before you load it. So once we have that done for every single part, and I'm going to go ahead here and kind of fast forward to doing this, but I'm going to do every part and get it set up. So there's a lot of polylines created. I'm going to explode all this. So now we're ready to go. Now another key thing is that the files do need to be in inches. So if they're not in inches, it won't produce properly. It won't come across the right size when you go into Studio. So I'm going to save this as a DXF file now. And I'm actually going to save it a couple versions back, just so there's no issue with the age of my software. And I'm going to save. Okay, so now we can open up Studio. So we can just straight away open up that DXF file. So the more points you load in here, the more precision you create all those curves with, the kind of bigger these files end up being. So here's our Studio file. So what you'll notice right away is this is just one big file, right? So the first thing you do is release this compound path. So that's going to break it into individual parts now. So what you'll notice is if we bring this in here, and this is a way to check that everything's sort of worked out, is that these geometries should match up with your overlap. So you see I have this overlap in here. And so we're spot on the money. So from our original drawing, when we've moved it from one to the other, all of our parts are exactly correct. If they weren't, you'd find that there would be some discrepancies in that geometry, and it's pretty key to make sure those are right. If they're not right, you very much will likely have a problem lining up the parts. Like, it might look close, but when you actually cut the parts out and put them on the model, they're going to have some issues with the fit up. So you really want to make sure that this geometry matches sort of what you have intended. And if you do want to use your CAD files as templates, you won't be able to, because the geometries will be slightly off. And it looks like they're pretty close, but they're not. So you really have to kind of double check that all the parts, match up. And you can kind of visually do it like this, and go, yeah, that's obviously the right curve. These are obviously the right curves in here now, right? So I have, this was learned by my own mistakes. So, like I say, on the smaller parts and the stab and stuff, you probably get away with it a little bit if it's off. But on the big wing parts, these are large pieces. Small deviations in geometry, add up over the whole length of the piece. So then you have an issue. So now to cut these, all you really need to do, this is your cutting area here. I've kind of sized this for 24 or 12 inches, pardon me, wide, since that's the maximum of the cutter. and about 23 inches long, because that's what's standard width of Ultracote. So you really load your part in there. So as you can see, that takes a pretty good chunk of covering up. You'll have to mirror them. So if you want a left and a right, you need to copy this part first. Copy and paste it. So we have two, and then really just mirror it, flip horizontally. So now we have both left and right. And you can flip these around and, reorder them in order to try to fit them on your piece of covering. These parts are big on the wing, so they're definitely going to take up more covering than the stab. The stab you can usually get a couple pieces on within that 12 inches. On the wing, it's pretty tough. You can see these kind of don't line up. You might get the smaller ones on, but these bigger parts, you're probably stuck doing one at a time. You don't want to put them so close to the edge, and you don't want to have any overlap. So you're better just to do one at a time with that. Once you're ready, anything inside this red area is going to be cut. So you basically click the send, and I've loaded an Ultracote file in here already. You can create your own user-defined, just add new material type and put your settings in. So what I'm using for settings is a 1 on the knife, just a standard, not the overlap one. A force of 3 or 4, you might want to experiment with that. You try to want to set that force up so that it doesn't cut all the way through the backing paper. A speed of 5 is 1 and passes, or a speed of 5 is okay and passes for 1. Really, these line segment overcuts or track enhancing, I've never played with them. I've found that it cuts very good. It cuts better than you can cut it by hand for the most part. So really, it's just the force you really need to play with. If you're finding you're cutting through the paper, just drop that force down by 1. Or if you're finding you're maybe not quite getting the full cut, you can go to 4. Certain colors seem to be a little more sensitive to that, like red almost needs a 4. The whites, the blues and stuff seem to cut fine with a 3. So once you've got that material set up, you just a full cut, so it'll cut anything that's in here exactly on this red line, and then really you just hit send. Once your machine is ready to go and you've loaded material in there, you hit send, and off your part goes to the cutter. And then it's really just a matter of repeat this over and over again until you're done all your parts. So it's pretty straightforward. You can go back here when you're done these parts. You can move them off. You can group them together. For the future, just hit that and group. And put them off to the side, right? And then you can go ahead and move your next pieces in here and cut those. So that's really all there is to it. Most of the trick is in the CAD drawing and getting this set up for these curves properly, and the rest of this in this actual software is pretty straightforward. Okay, so I got my parts. I did adjust this a little bit in the sense that I've split this white into multiple separate pieces, just so that I can manage it on a common size of covering, rather than trying to make one huge piece, which wouldn't fit obviously within the cutter. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the blue here now, and I've got the camera on the blue itself. So we're going to go to send. So it'll just bring up, here's the parts of blue. So I got my force set to 4. I've actually set this to 3.5. I don't know if it actually works at 3.5 or if it just defaults to 4. But I do have it. I did put it in at 3.5. Everything's ready to go. The covering's loaded up. So we're just going to hit send on this, and it's going to go into the machine and start cutting it. that's it. Really, we just hit unload. We'll shoot it out. And I noticed this actually went through the backing paper. That's what I mean about some colors. It goes through and some it doesn't. So blue can probably use a little bit less force. But in this case, it only went through part of it. It didn't go through the whole thing, so that's okay. As long as it's not going through the entire piece, because otherwise it'll kind of fall out of the machine. So that's pretty much it. You can go ahead and peel your part out and start covering with it. There you go. Perfectly cut covering.